First coming up, who will be talking today, is Sheena Wright. Sheena is the CEO of the United Way of New York City. She is the first female CEO in the 80-year history of this United Way. She brings on-the-ground experience where she led a community development organization in Harlem, and she's an attorney. So I can't wait to watch her cover everything she needs to do in 5 minutes. Okay, so next I'd like to introduce Dave Beamisterfer. And David right now is the president and CEO of the Forum. And the Forum has 60 regional grantmaker associations and affinity groups serving over 7,000 philanthropic entities. We know David in Florida very well when he led the Florida Philanthropic Network, and anybody who's from Michigan might know his good work 10 years where he was at the Michigan Council of Foundations. And Mei Hong, who comes to us from Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. She works with donors and foundations and corporate entities to achieve their philanthropic aspirations. What's cool about May, Ralph Smith says she's one of the 3 smartest women on the globe. So in her 5 minutes, she's gonna prove it. All right, but May brings a passion and a heart. She most recently served as chairman of Grantmakers for Effective Organizations, so she knows how to connect the heart and the head in philanthropy. So we are going to get started now with our session. So I think I'm going to come over and sit down, and our first speaker actually is going to be Sheena today. You are first, okay?
Well, thank you, and I'm so happy to be here. I feel a real connection to the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading. I actually started at the United Way of New York City in 2012. My very first day on the job was the day that Hurricane Sandy made landfall. So it's one of those experiences where you immediately appreciate what's happening in the organization, what the demands and needs are from the community that we served. And I didn't even really know where the bathroom was, so it was really very kind of shocking. And I got immediately introduced to the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading by someone who became my colleague and led our community impact work, Nicole Gallant, who was actually working with Ralph. And I really seized on it as a critical pinch point to really change the outcomes and the trajectory for the communities that we are charged to serve at the United Way of New York City. We had, for many years, been working in isolated impact areas, so education activities, financial strength and stability activities in one, and then health in another. And, across the spectrum, from cradle to, grave, and in New York City, where every community can be its own city in terms of the demographics and the differences in the population. And as opposed to kind of sprinkling resources broadly, and our mission was advancing the common good, which is good, but it wasn't really measurable, and we weren't really, we couldn't really measure moving the needle in demonstrable ways in the communities that we were charged to serve. And I'm from one of those communities in New York City. I'm from the South Bronx, and really benefited from a constellation of efforts to make sure that I had the opportunities to excel and that my mother could achieve a level of financial strength and stability. She was a single parent with 2 kids. So really trying to figure out what is going to make the most difference. And we were engaged in that campaign, I guess in 2013 and 2014. Immediately, we appreciated that we needed to be a dual generation strategy. That if we just focus on the kids and not the parents, and we had to really bring in the work that we were doing across for adults so we would get further faster. We started our work in Mott Haven, which is in the one of the poorest congressional districts in the country, the highest levels of food insecurity, heavy immigrant population. And in our community, 90% of kids were not reading on grade level, 90. And so we immediately went about doing a diagnosis to understand, well, what is getting in the way? We developed the Community Solution Action Plan. And we also had a heavy focus on instructional leadership and working with teachers and principals, as well as parents in ways to help them get to a level of financial stability. We had about 30% of our parents were in transitional housing. So when you think about the impacts of chronic absence, and we were able to galvanize it in community and really serve as a backbone and resource that community with not only dollars, but volunteers from our corporate partners. And in 3 years, we went from 90% of kids not reading on grade level in Mott Haven to 47% of kids reading on grade level. And our ultimate goal and objective, we are not interested in islands of success, because that happens a lot in a big city like New York. If you're lucky enough to get into these few schools here or there, or lucky enough to get into that workforce development program, good luck to you. And that was one of the challenges I saw in Harlem. We worked with 5 schools, and they did well, but there were 33,000 kids that went to school in Harlem every day, and they did not have those opportunities to be successful. So our ultimate goal and objective is to lift up what we've learned and influence the largest public school system in the country. We have to change the policies and systems as our mission of the New York City Department of Education. There was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal just a week ago. Some of you might have seen it. Our chancellor has, she seized on 3rd grade reading conceptually, but decided that the solution was to put a reading coach in every school in a low-income community in the 2nd grade, and that's it. The article, as you can imagine, says, well, guess what? That's not going to work. You need multiple interventions that are working in synergy, that are really addressing the actual needs of the students and their families. And so that is what our ultimate goal and objective is, and we are really excited to scale the campaign across many neighborhoods in New York City and ultimately influence policy and systems change is our ultimate goal.
Sheena just touched on a whole bunch of different categories of what More Than Money Philanthropy is about. So what we'd like is, you're going to have 10 minutes now at your table to share with people at your table how you are working to create a constellation of connectedness so that every child, family, is able to be part of this success stream that we're working. So you're going to have 10 minutes, and then we're going to do some shout outs at the end. So feel free to share, how is your community creating this constellation of connectedness? Now, realizing that you've got break time later to continue your individual conversations, I'm hoping that there were some nuggets at the table that just must be shared for the greater good. Did anybody have some nuggets they would like to share? We've got microphones that'll come and connect with you so you can share for everyone. As much as we had Nancy and Andrew as plants the last time, I have no one to plant this time. Okay, could you share who you are and what your nugget is?
My name is Barb Silvis. I'm with the Women's Leadership Council of the United Way of Rhode Island, and also a board member of Kids Count, which is our lead agency in the campaign. The thing that the Women's Leadership Council brings to the effort is an ability to activate the unusual suspects to build community support for this effort. We have high-level donors, women that are focused on children's literacy from the beginning, so we have 150 of those, and we are intent on sending them out into the community equipped to talk with their neighbors, their friends, their golf partners, and so on, that would be outside of a group like this, which is actually engaged in the work. So,
excellent, excellent. All right, that's going into the neighborhoods, isn't it, and with a different twist. Anybody else have something that was really cool at your table? A nugget?
Deborah, I don't know that it's cool or original, but one thing
Oh,
at
who
our
are
table-
you? Who are
Oh,
you?
Yeah, that's right. I know you, but they may not. Joy Mailer. I'm the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Sun Coast in Florida. And one of the things that we talked about here is a couple of things. We're at various stages of development in our community grade level reading. So we're learning from each other. And I think the other thing is that no one person or no one organization can do this. It really does take a community. And CBOs, funders, everyone involved. So it's just a reaffirmation of what y'all have been saying.
Well, and as we think about this movement, every program, every constituency, everybody, everything's a thread. And it's our challenge on how do we weave all those different textures of threads into an absolutely vibrant, strong tapestry. So every program's great, but it's stronger when it's part of a tapestry. Anybody else have a nugget to share from your table? Okay, well, I'm glad you had really good conversations. Then we're going to go to letting Dave share his wisdom with us.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I first have to just give a shout out. I think we at least two of my members here, Sammy Moon with the Mississippi Association of Grantmakers and Carrie Boutel with the Iowa Counselor Foundation. So glad to see you all here. And one gentle correction to Deborah's intro to me. I spent 10 years in Minnesota, not Michigan, a different M state. In case there's anyone in Michigan saying, I don't remember him.
Sorry.
I'm here to talk about the role of funders as policy advocates in your more than money continuum. I think it's no secret that historically philanthropy has been cautious about engaging in policy and advocacy work. That is starting to change. There was a survey out this year by the Center for Effective Philanthropy showing that one of the top changes in practice that foundation leaders plan to do this year is to get more engaged in policy and advocacy at the state and local level. But there's a long way for us to go for, I think, funders to really leverage fully your assets as a policy advocate for the issues you care about. And why should you do this? You can be funding any issue, such as improving grade level reading for years and years, and one policy change can suddenly either catapult that 100 times further, or it can stop it in its tracks. And so that, for me, is, I think, the biggest reason that you need to care about policy and advocacy, and why you need to be using your unique assets as a policy advocate in your efforts in your coalitions. You bring a unique and powerful voice to policy issues unlike anyone else. Deborah mentioned I was leading the Florida Philanthropic Network for many years, and while I was there, I pushed our organization and our members to get more engaged in policy and to take positions on issues outside of philanthropy issues. We took positions on education, health. Now I think they're working on a number of other issues as well. And I was up there a lot in Capitol Hill, that's where I'm in DC now, in Tallahassee, the state capitol, doing policy briefings, and I would have advocates, nonprofit advocates come up to me and say, thank you so much for this. Your voice is so important. You're viewed very differently by policymakers. You're not seen as having a dog in the fight. You're not seen as wanting funding from them. And they said, just keep it up. Your voice is so important. So I think we all need to figure out ways for philanthropy to capitalize on that as much as you can. And now, I'm not talking about lobbying here, obviously. I'm talking about advocacy. And it's something that you can be involved in. It's perfectly legal. You can leverage your financial investments by hosting policy forums, by policy briefings, doing op-eds, educating legislators, and much more. And you can do as much of this as you want. And because this was about more than money, I'm talking here about not financial investments in policy and advocacy, although those are very important as well. But I think you can lend your voice in other ways to policy efforts. But still, funding advocacy and policy is important as well. There was a recent study by the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy showing that every dollar that funders invest in policy comes back $115 in community benefit. So that's really, really powerful and really something to be thinking about. That same study found that one of the best ways to be successful in policy is through coalitions, community coalitions like the ones you all are leading in your communities. So funders are powerful voices, and the coalitions you are part of are really, really powerful in moving policies that will advance the issue you care about, which in this case is more kids reading at grade level. This is something you can do. This is something that's legal. I think it's one of the most powerful things you can do in the campaign for grade level reading. Your words that you're using here are lift, learn, and lead. And I think this is one of the biggest things you can do to really lead your efforts, and lead them in a big way. And Deborah, in her opening remarks, mentioned that funders really can be a moral compass for our communities, and be a compass of integrity. I think with some of the things going on now in the political environment, even the shooting, the horrific shooting this morning, could lead some of us to shy away and pull back and retract from that. And I think your voice and your participation policy is needed now more than ever before. So I really encourage you to get as engaged as you can and push yourself for new ways you can be an effective policy advocate in your community. Thank you.
All right, so now it's your turn. You get 10 minutes to talk at your table about, so how easy is it to do this? And gosh darn, we've got it all figured out, let me tell you how to do it, or I don't even know where to start. So take your 10 minutes and share to help your fellow colleagues. Okay, I'm going to interrupt your conversations. And again, I want to remind you there's a microphone roaming around. And this is our time to share nuggets beyond your table to help your fellow colleague funders. Who's got something that they learned at their table? Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Geenan from the Quad Cities. We're right on the Mississippi River of Illinois and Iowa. And we were talking, we're all relatively small in terms of our funding here at the
There is no small. There's only mighty.
There is mighty. From a policy standpoint, we're not in the position to feel, when you feel overwhelmed if you have to write your own policy brief, or how do you go about doing that? The easiest way to start getting engaged in advocacy work is to get your cities and municipalities first. Find a proclamation, and that kind of opens the doors and helped us feel more comfortable moving things forward.
Great. Start local as we get stronger and learn. Other nuggets, anybody has things to share? Andrew, I know you're bursting over there. All right, and I know we called on you before, but I mean, this is your life. Now give us a nugget.
So this is like the #1 table in the room. I'm just putting it out there. We're having wonderful conversations. I guess the nugget that we got is, how does philanthropy help advance the voices of folks on the ground, giving credibility to folks on the ground as part of these bigger movements?
Yes, that's what a movement is. All voices. Another voice right here. And name and who you are.
Ron McClain from the Institute of Mental Hygiene of New Orleans, and at the very best table out here. So we talked about the importance of data in terms of informing, your policy advocacy, and how that also works to maybe engage people. We talked about that and recognizing the context of the work. And for me and for many of us, that sometimes there's this ideological divide even within our groups, particularly in this climate, nationally and locally. So the data helps. And also it may make sense to go at something that everybody can agree on. Most people support children. And so sometimes it's helpful to start with low-hanging fruit and then build up for the bigger battle.
Great point about the power of data combined with story. The head and the heart will help engage people as we take the conversation to higher level. Nancy, are you bursting again? Okay.
Well, I encourage us to all be courageous when it comes to policy, and always think about, whenever you're looking at an issue, is it a policy that's keeping your families from moving forward? Because policies can be changed, and I can give you a really good example where it was much mightier than the dollar. We were able to convince our housing commission, it no longer works, but it did for about 10 years, to put children who had aged out of foster care at the top of our Section 8 housing list. So there are many youth in our community that were able to get housing that our foundation could have never funded that rent. So it's not always DC, it's not always your state capital. A lot of times it can be your school board or your local institution. So I really encourage you to always at least think about, what are the policies and how are they working for the people that we are trying to help?
And that actually is a combination of two words, practical and possibilities. Pursuing both practical and possibilities. Anyone else have a burning? Where? Oh, I can't see. The light is blinding me. Over here. Yes. Microphone in motion.
Hi, I'm Dave Brody, Executive Director at First Five Santa Cruz County. I think first, at our table, there was general agreement that in the philanthropic sector, there is more engagement in philanthropy. And then in the universe of First Five, which we're this unique sort of entity or kind of public agencies that can act in very similar ways to philanthropy, in California, we've become much better organized and engaging with our legislators and engaging in policy advocacy work and the types of things that were described. So that really is occurring, and we're proud of it. I think our nugget is you just got to jump in the water. You just got to get in front of your legislators. You just got to show up. I mean, I've had so many conversations recently on legislative visits where we're like, we didn't know that's how it actually works. You know, these are people too, and they really care if you just talk to them. Yes. And being that third party sort of disinterested group is really helpful. And then the last piece that we talked about is you have to be realistic about where our families are and what they're dealing with on a day-to-day level. And one way in Santa Cruz that we've really been true to that is we've engaged our parents. So I was sharing a story that we've brought monolingual Spanish-speaking parents to our Board of Supervisors and to our local legislators to speak specifically about what they're experiencing and what they're asking for. And issues they've advocated for are in the state budget that's about to be signed by our governor, so we're really proud of that.
Nothing like authentic stories. Very good. I'm going to hold, this must have been a good topic because we had more hands that I can't call on now, but I'm going to take advantage of having the panel. We actually had our own table talk about this. So I'm going to ask, there's a few nuggets we would like to further share with you on that. So,
Okay, one nugget. I was recently at an event and I heard this quote that I think is so powerful and important, certainly for this room. Programs can't fix what policy has forged. And so the importance of appreciating that there's always a policy that's impacting the lives of certainly low-income people across our country, and really being focused on that.
And just one other thing for you to think about as you think about your own policy and advocacy work is don't forget about your boards. Your boards members have most likely very deep community connections and can be powerful advocates for you if you work with them and engage them and help bring them, educate them on how to advocate for your issues. So make that any part of your plans.
great. All right, so we're going to now go to our third panelist. And May, take us to More Than Philanthropy.
More Than Money Philanthropy.
More Than Money
Great.
Philanthropy.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I am delighted and honored to be with you all. I, like many of you, am here because it's pretty much impossible to say no to Ralph Smith. You know, when Ralph first asked me to do this, I was thinking, okay, more than money, you know, I'm thinking about time, talent, treasure, social networks, influence, social capital, and all those things. And then it kind of hit me. You know, when did our philanthropy actually become about money in the first place? Since when is our dollars in giving a proxy for our love of humanity? And I started thinking about this question, and I tried to do some research and digging and reading all the books on history of philanthropy. And I think that it actually happened around the 1780s in France. So I'm going to go with that for now, and we can talk more about that later, and I'll talk a little bit about why I think that's the case. But the point is that prior to that point, that period of time, philanthropy was never about the gift. Philanthropy was about the giver. It was about an expression of a deeply held conviction that you as the giver had about how you want to show up in the world and the mark you want to leave on the world. And we were demonstrating what we believed was our obligation to our fellow humankind. Now, in the early traditions, it was very much about faith. Every religious tradition has philanthropy and giving and our care for our fellow humankind as a core tenet of the expression of faith. But somewhere along the line, that changed. And philanthropy no longer became about the giver. It became about the worthiness of the recipient. And that is when we started to measure our philanthropy with our dollars. I want to share with you a different perspective on what I think the more than money philanthropy is about. Can we flash this quote up by Maya Angelou? This is from an essay that she wrote in 1993. And she says that, "I have found that among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver. The giver is as enriched as the recipient, and more important, that intangible but very real psychic force of good in the world is increased. The gift is upholding the foundation of the universe, and each boon we give strengthens the pillars of the world." That is what the more than money philanthropy should be about. I believe, and it's a term that's been used a couple of times throughout your gatherings, sir, I believe our philanthropy should be an expression of our hope. Hope is that unshakable state, that inner state of being about what we believe the world should look like. Václav Havel called hope an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. And in this sense, it is not the same as joy that things are going well, or a willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for success. But rather, it's an ability to work for something because it is good, not because it has a chance to succeed. And if we view our philanthropy as an expression of hope, we can say to the world things that they don't actually believe. We can get them to do things that we don't think that can actually be done. And our hope, expressed through our giving, says to the world that the status quo is unacceptable and that change is possible. And that is why a gathering like this is turning up the volume on that song. If you look at every major social movement in history, the idea of the mass gathering was a core practice in how and why these movements succeeded and were sustained over time. It helped people feed each other's hope. Now, for all you left-brained people out there, you probably are thinking like, oh God, this is so, as I heard at one conference recently, so squishy woo-woo. There is now, however, a lot of scientific research being done across disciplines that talks about the importance of hope in resilience, creativity, innovation. And even in business, people are studying this in terms of profits, jobs, and job satisfaction. So I want to challenge you all today to think about, does your giving adequately express how deeply hopeful you are about this work? Thank you.
So in the realm of squishy woo-woo, all right, we would like you to take time at your tables now to share, how are you feeding your hope? Because the heart of the work that we are doing in this movement is how we engage as people and how we keep it fresh and vibrant and ever in the space of possibilities. So take your time and share how you are feeding your hope. All right, I need to interrupt you. And I know this is probably hard because you've got great things you want to share. Again, we have our roaming microphones. There has to be a nugget or two out there to share about how you feed your hope. Who's got something that they want to share? Microphone right over here. Remember to tell us who you are and where you're from.
Thank you. Jennifer Leonard, Rochester Area Community Foundation and Rock the Future, our Cradle to Career initiative and JLR sponsor. Two things. We think the next generations, millennials in particular, our young professionals, are a great source of hope and inspiration. We love their values, and we love their diversity, and we love their the way they're taking on leading in our communities. So that's one. The second is we use data and success to help stoke our hope. And when things move forward, we celebrate. When two agencies decided they'd share their new structural racism training program for their staff, with other agencies, and they kind of thought they'd invite a few in. They had to close the door at 29 other organizations that stood in line. That's success.
Okay, who's got another one about feeding our hope and the joy in what we do? I don't, oh, hand. Yes, please.
So, hi, I'm Molly Cinderbrand, Center for High Impact Philanthropy at the University of Pennsylvania. It's a mouthful. So we had a similar discussion at our table, and one of the folks at our table, Sarah, talked about publicizing and going to local papers who may need news, and saying that it's easier to print the negative. But if you can give them that positive message and celebrate the success, you can really get it out there and get communities to be more hopeful.
Well, in building upon both comments, it's finding the successes to celebrate. And guess what? People like to be part of cool things. That's why you get standing room only, or, we closed out. Other comments that anybody has on this? All right. Yes, right here, right up front, please. Next time, we're going to have the wanters to share have to run to the microphone instead of having the poor microphone person run to us.
This isn't from...
Now, who would you be, sir?
I'm Brian Reese, Spire CoLab, Suncoast Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Sarasota, Florida. We have a unique media partnership with the Patterson Foundation, funding reporting on grade level reading with the Sarasota Herald Tribune, our daily newspaper. And just to build on what you said, people like data. They love to read data in newspaper stories. But you know what they like even more, especially on social media, is a good, happy story. Like the tale of some person's success. That is much more impactful with our readers than data is. So there's a place for both. But if you're trying to tell your story to other places, to the media, you always want to have the data, and then you want to have the story that actually brings people into it so they can read the data. So.
No data without stories, no stories without data. That's the power of the message as we build a movement. Again, I have the light in my eye, so I might miss a hand. Any other hands going up? I do want to turn to our panel because, again, we had a pretty good table too. Any nuggets that anyone would like to share or affirm? May, anything else from what you thought afterwards?
Just to build on the most recent comment about data and stories, I'm going to steal a quote that I have on my wall from a staff member on Dave's team, Maggie Osborne. She said, data makes the stories true, but stories make the data real. And that's just a way you need to
could someone tweet that? I can't tweet.
But credit Maggie Osborne. I did not make that quote. It's somebody on Dave's
Could you
staff.
say it one more time?
So, data make the stories true. Stories make the data real.
Okay, powerful. Oh, that was a good closer. Could I ask you all to join me in thanking this incredibly fun, wonderful, deep panel? And then you can go.